Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So in today's video, we have some good news for Social Security beneficiaries as the expected cost of living adjustment next year in 2025 is coming in even higher than expected. So we are going to be going over that. However, we also have some bad news in this video for Americans with inflation increasing, with the most recent inflation report coming out showing that it's going up higher than what it should be, which kind of puts the future into question. But before we go ahead and dive into the main content of today's video, if you wouldn't mind helping me out real quickly by just giving this video a like, that just helps out with the good old YouTube algorithm, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already. Plus, if you would like to receive up to $10,000 in free stocks or $10,000 in free cash, in a pinned comment below, I will be leaving a link to Moomoo. All you have to do is once you click on that link is just sign up for a free account and then deposit at least $100. At that point, Moomoo will be sending you at least 5 free stocks worth all the way up to $10,000. And if you'd really just have the cash, all you have to do is once you receive the free stocks is just sell them for what they're worth and then transfer the cash value right back to your bank account. Okay, so diving right into our lead story of today's video. So we recently had the most recent inflation report coming out in April. This was, of course, for the month of March. And it actually showed that consumer prices rose 3.5% from a year ago in March, which is more than expected. This article is from CNBC. So the consumer price index accelerated at a faster than expected pace in March, pushing inflation higher and likely dashing hopes that the Federal Reserve will be able to cut interest rates anytime soon. The CPI, a broad measure of goods and services cost across the economy, rose 0.4% for the month, putting the 12-month inflation rate at 3.5%, or 0.3 percentage points higher than in February, the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on Wednesday. Economists surveyed by Dow Jones have been looking for a 0.3% gain and a 3.4% year-over-year level. So basically what we're looking at here is the Federal Reserve has been potentially looking at cutting interest rates at some point this year. They figured they probably would as inflation continued to get lower, because basically whenever inflation was super high, 8 to 9% rates, as you remember, last year they were raising rates little by little. This was in hopes to cut down on inflation, and they achieved that goal, but then they stopped raising the rates because they were figuring that inflation was going to get back down to their 2% year-over-year figure, which is pretty much what they were shooting for. But at this point, it doesn't seem like they're going to get back down to their 2% figure. And they already promised the American public that they were going to cut interest rates at some point this year. And whenever they decide to cut interest rates, what that's basically going to mean for inflation is that more than likely inflation is going to go back up. So now they're now in the situation where they already made these public statements saying that, hey, at some point in 2024 we are going to be cutting interest rates. But they're now seeing that inflation is not going back down. Instead, it seems like it's going to be creeping back up. And if they lower rates at some point this year, that means that inflation is going to go up even higher. And they're at a point where they don't want to raise rates once again, because that could end up crashing the economy. But if they lower rates, that's going to increase inflation. So they're kind of in this bad situation where they're really not sure what to do. Now, the article goes on to say that excluding volatile food and energy components, the core CPI also accelerated 0.4% on a monthly basis, while rising 3.8% from a year ago, compared with the respective estimates for 0.3 and 3.7%. Increasing inflation was also bad news for workers, as real average hourly earnings were flat on the month and increased just 0.6% over the past year, according to a separate BLS release. So basically, those who are working, they only received a 0.6% raise over the past year, even though inflation has been higher than that amount. So wages at work are not keeping up with inflation, which means that people working are falling further and further behind because they're paying more for goods and services, yet their raises at work are not keeping up with the same price increases. So obviously this is not a good thing for the economy here at home, and is leading people to go out and get second and potentially even third jobs. And we actually have older folks who are receiving Social Security retirement benefits who are now faced with, the real world consequence of having to go back to work. Even though they thought they were going into a nice retirement where they would wake up, ride bikes, sit out on a beach, enjoy their time, take in hobbies, now they're faced to go back into the workforce. This is a reality. So this article right here is from the Tampa Bay Times. It says that older Floridians are going back to work as life gets less affordable. So Larry Gessick couldn't hear his alarm, so when it went off at 5 a.m., his wife nudged him awake. A half hour later, he was out the door, green polo tucked in, lunch cooler in hand. While neighbors slept, Gessick ambled to his car, guided by street lamps and moonlight. He is 77 years old, a Vietnam veteran, and a great-grandfather to two. He's also part of the fastest growing age group in the labor force, people 75 and older. Read that again. He's also part of the fastest growing age group in the labor force, people 75 and older. These are folks that should be enjoying their retirement, having enough savings, plus Social Security benefits to not have to go back to work. Yet, this is actually the fastest growing age group in the country, 75 and older. Let that sink in. On that early morning in March, he was on his way to Publix for work. Americans are living longer, and for some, continuing to work in their later years is a practical choice made for mental and social well-being. But for many, like Gessick, it's also a matter of necessity. I think that's also important that some people are going back to work because it's, for their social, to keep their mind sharp, to do something during the day. Just sitting around drinking margaritas at the beach is not a realistic thing. So some people do go back to work just, for that, for the social and, just to keep themselves sharp. But for, a lot of people over the past couple of years, because inflation has been going up, it's just a financial necessity. That's something that they do point out in that article. Now, they go on to say that seniors work because they have to afford medical bills, mortgages, food, and the occasional pleasure, because their fixed incomes and drained savings accounts are no longer enough to keep them afloat, as the cost of groceries, homeowners association fees, and insurance rates soar, because they're one crisis from financial disaster and fear they won't be able to afford assisted living if their health suddenly declines. They'll go on to say that nearly 80% of Americans believe there is a retirement crisis, according to a report released this year by the National Institute on Retirement Security. More than half fear they won't be financially secure when they retire, if the day ever comes. So obviously that's very bad news there. Now, in good news, with inflation going up, of course, that also means a higher increase in 2025 for all Social Security beneficiaries, thanks in part to the cost of living adjustment. So according to USA Today, Social Security's COLA estimate rises, but of course, seniors could struggle as inflation heats up. So the latest estimate of Social Security's cost of living adjustment for 2025 rose to 3% after the government reported hotter than expected inflation in March, new calculations showed on Wednesday. The higher COLA adjustment was a third this year after the reacceleration of inflation each month in 2024. The 2025 COLA estimate was 1.75% in January and 2.4% in February. And also, according to the Senior Citizens League 2024 Senior Survey, the following results are based on 1,157 survey responses. So out of those responses, 43% report that household expenses increased by over $185 per month in 2023. 71% indicated their household costs rose by more than 3.2% in 2023, and this was the COLA for that year. 53% said they have spent their emergency savings, and 61% indicated that food is their most increased expense. Now, according to Shannon Benton, who is one of the executive directors of the Senior Citizens League, she said one of the following things that really stood out in my mind. She said that if the COLA increased by 2.6%, that would be an approximate $45 increase. She says, what can you buy for that? Not much. And, just definitely true there with inflation rising. And again, a lot of people look at the number that the government uses, the way that they weigh the statistic of the cost of living adjustment and inflation. They say they kind of rig the number to make it seem a little bit lower than what it should be. If they actually went by a realistic number, that it would actually be even higher than what they come out with. Think of that what you will. But again, it looks like on average, Americans are going to be receiving right around a $45 increase, but we will not know this number for sure until October, whenever the official numbers are released. But that's all we have for today's video. I certainly hope that you enjoyed and found value out of it. If you did, again, I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already, and I will see you in the next video.